For a few years in the middle of the 1980s, Don Mattingly looked like the next permanent Yankee legend. A batting champion, an MVP, a Gold Glove first baseman. The kind of hitter who could chase 350, drive in 145 runs, and make Yankee Stadium feel steady during an unstable era. He was Donnie Baseball, and the path seemed obvious. Cooperstown felt possible. October felt inevitable. The Yankees had found the man who could carry them into whatever came next. But baseball has a way of changing a career without making a clean announcement. The swing stayed beautiful. The respect never left. But something in the story began to bend. And by the time Mattingly finally reached the postseason, the ending was already closing in. By the time Don Mattingly finally got to October, it was almost too late. That is the part that still hangs over the story. For 13 years, he had been the face of the New York Yankees during the one stretch when being the face of the Yankees did not come with a parade, a ring, or a place in all those familiar October highlight reels. He had been the batting champion, the MVP, the captain, the Gold Glove first baseman, the quiet standard in pinstripes when the franchise was still searching for its way back. And then, in 1995, at age 34, with his back no longer giving him the same swing he once had, Mattingly finally reached the postseason. Not as the young superstar everyone thought would spend years there, not as the dangerous hitter who owned the American League in the mid-1980s, but as the veteran Yankee, the man fans had waited to see under those lights. The opponent was the Seattle Mariners. The series was the American League Division Series. And for 5 games, Mattingly gave Yankee Stadium something it had been waiting more than a decade to feel. He hit .417. He drove in 6 runs. He doubled 4 times. In Game 2, in what would become his final game at Yankee Stadium, he hit a go-ahead home run that sent the old ballpark into the kind of roar that seemed made for him all along. It was not just a home run. It was a release. Years of losing seasons, near misses, managerial changes, bad timing, and quiet frustration came out in one swing.
For fans who had watched him carry himself through the lean Yankee years, it felt like baseball had finally given Don Mattingly the stage it owed him. But baseball does not always pay its debts cleanly. In Game 5, the last game of the series, and the last game of Mattingly's career, he came through again. He broke a tie with a 2-run double. Once more, the man who had waited forever for October had delivered in October. Then the bullpen could not hold it. Seattle won in the 11th inning. The Yankee season ended. Mattingly's playing career ended with it. And 1 year later, without him, the Yankees won the World Series. That is the cruel shape of the whole thing. Not that Don Mattingly was forgotten. He was too good and too loved for that. But his career landed in one of baseball's most painful in-between places. He was great enough to feel like a legend. His peak was strong enough to sound like Cooperstown. His uniform number would be retired by the New York Yankees. And still, when people ask what happened to Don Mattingly, the answer is not simple. Because the story is not about a player who failed. It is about how close a player can come to everything and still have history close the door just a little too soon. Before Yankee Stadium knew him as Donnie Baseball, before the batting titles and the MVP votes and the Monument Park plaque, he was Donald Arthur Mattingly from Evansville, Indiana. That part matters, but not because every baseball story needs a childhood scene. It matters because Mattingly's career always carried the feel of a player who had earned everything the slow way. He was born on April 20th, 1961. Naturally left-handed, but unusually adaptable, he showed ambidextrous ability as a young player. In Little League, he pitched and played first base, throwing both right-handed and left-handed. In American Legion Ball for Funkhauser Post number 8, he played second base and threw right-handed.
That detail almost sounds impossible if all you remember is the smooth left-handed first baseman in Yankee pinstripes. But it hints at something important. Mattingly was not just a big bat waiting to be discovered. He was a baseball player in the old-fashioned sense. He could handle the game. He could adjust. He could find a way onto the field.
At Reitz Memorial High School in Evansville, he became the kind of local athlete people remember for decades. The Tigers won a state championship in 1978 and finished as runner-up in 1979. During the 1978 and 1979 seasons, the team ran off a state record 59 straight victories before losing to Logansport. Mattingly hit 463 during his 4 years of high school baseball. He was All-City, All-Southern Indiana Athletic Conference, and All-State in both 1978 and 1979. He still held school records for hits, doubles, triples, RBI, and runs, according to the source material. His 25 triples were also an Indiana state record. He was not just a baseball player either. He played basketball and football too, and made the SIAC All-Conference basketball team in 1978. So why did he last until the 19th round of the 1979 draft? That is where the story starts to get interesting. His father, Bill, had told major league teams that Don intended to honor a college commitment and would not sign a professional contract. Mattingly had been offered a scholarship to play baseball at Indiana State, but he was not interested in going to college. The Yankees took him in the 19th round. Then he signed. The bonus was $23,000. For a franchise built on legends, dynasties, and the biggest stage in the sport, one of its most beloved modern players entered professional baseball without the ceremony of a top pick. He was not drafted like a future MVP. He was drafted like a risk. And that is part of what makes the next stretch so revealing. Because once Mattingly got into pro ball, the game started telling the Yankees what the draft had not. His first stop was Oneonta in the New York Penn League in 1979. Mattingly hoped to bat 500 there, which says something about either ambition or expectation. He ended up hitting 349. Disappointed or not, that is how he began. The next year, with Greensboro in the South Atlantic League, he hit 358. He led the league in batting average and had 177 hits. He won the league MVP award and was named to the postseason All-Star team. In 1981, with AA Nashville, he hit 316 and led the Southern League with 35 doubles. Again, he was an All-Star. Again, the bat kept answering.
By the time he reached AAA Columbus in 1982, he was hitting 325 when the Yankees called him up in September. The numbers were there, and yet there were still doubts. Not about whether he could hit. That part was getting harder to question. The concerns were about speed and power. Where did he fit? Was he going to hit enough home runs for first base? Was he athletic enough for somewhere else? Bob Schaefer, his manager at Greensboro, said the organization even considered moving him to second base, where he would throw right-handed. Think about that for a moment. The player who would become one of the greatest defensive first basemen in American League history was once being talked about as a possible second baseman because the organization was still trying to figure out what it had. That is how careers begin sometimes. Not with certainty, with questions. Mattingly made his major league debut on September 8, 1982, as a late-inning defensive replacement against the Baltimore Orioles. He got his first at-bat a few days later, on September 11, against Milwaukee, and popped out to third. His first major league hit came on October 1st against the Boston Red Sox, a single to right field off Steve Crawford in the bottom of the 11th inning. He finished that first call-up with 2 hits in 12 at-bats. Nothing about those 12 at-bats announced what was coming. In 1983, he was still part-time, moving between first base and the outfield. He was sent back to Columbus after 4 games in April, then returned later and hit .283 in 279 at-bats. His first major league home run
came on June 24 against John Tudor at Fenway Park. A useful young hitter, maybe. A future batting champion? Maybe not yet. But baseball has a way of changing the room quickly when a player's confidence and opportunity finally meet. By 1984, the Yankees had stopped experimenting. Don Mattingly became their full-time first baseman, and suddenly the whole league had to pay attention. The 1984 season turned Mattingly from a promising young hitter into a major American League name. He was selected as a reserve for the All-Star game. He kept hitting. And by the final weekend, he was locked in a batting race with his own teammate, Dave Winfield. Winfield was already a star.
Big, graceful, powerful, expensive, famous. Mattingly was the emerging hitter, compact and serious, with a swing that seemed built to find grass. Going into the final game of the season, Mattingly trailed Winfield by 2 points. 2 points. It is the kind of race that used to hold a season in place. The kind of thing fans followed in box scores and newspapers, one at-bat at a time. No wild card chase. No expanded postseason drama. Just 2 Yankees, 1 batting title, and 1 last day. Mattingly went 4 for 5. Winfield went 1 for 4. Mattingly won the American League batting title at 3-4-3. Winfield finished at 3-4-0. That final day did more than settle a statistical race. It gave Mattingly a kind of identity. He was no longer just the young guy who could hit. He was the hitter who could win a batting title in New York, against a star teammate, with the whole thing sitting on the final game. He also led the league with 207 hits and 44 doubles. He hit 23 home runs, drove in 110 runs, and finished near the top of the league in slugging percentage. This was not empty contact. It was full production. And yet, what made Mattingly so compelling was the way the numbers matched the eye test. He looked like he belonged in that uniform. There was no wasted motion, no theatrical edge, just the serious rhythm of a ball player who seemed to understand the responsibilities of being good in New York. But the dangerous thing about a season like 1984 is that it changes expectations. A batting title is not just an award, it becomes a forecast. And in 1985, Mattingly did not merely confirm the forecast, he raised it. The 1985 season is the one that makes the whole career harder to categorize. Because if Don Mattingly had been merely a good player with a memorable Yankee connection, the story would be easier. But for a stretch in the middle of the 1980s, he was not merely good. He was one of the best players in baseball. In 1985, Mattingly hit .324. He had 35 home runs, 48 doubles, and 145 runs batted in. He led the American League in RBI, total bases, sacrifice flies, and extra base hits. Those 145 RBI were the most in a season by a left-handed major league hitter since Ted Williams drove in 159 in 1949. That is the kind of sentence that stops a baseball fan. Ted Williams, 1949. And then Don Mattingly. He won the American League Most Valuable Player Award. And the MVP did not feel like a fluke or a product of one category or a New York publicity machine. He had hit for average. He had hit for power. He had driven in runs. He had piled up doubles. He had carried a lineup. He was also becoming elite defensively. Mattingly won his first Gold Glove in 1985. It would not be his last. By the end of his career, he would have 9 Gold Gloves, a league record for first baseman at the time. He led the American League in fielding percentage 7 times. He retired with a .996 career fielding percentage, then the highest in league history. First base can be a strange position in public memory. People notice the home runs,
They notice the RBI. They do not always notice the hands, the footwork, the throws saved, the infield stabilized. But Mattingly's defense was not a footnote. It was a major part of who he was. The Yankees even used him in unusual ways because of how much they trusted him. He appeared as a left-handed throwing second baseman during the resumed George Brett Pine Tar game in 1983, shifting from first base in the 9th inning for one batter. In 1986, he played 3 games at third base during a road series in Seattle, including one complete game, and recorded 11 assists with 1 error while throwing left-handed. Those are odd baseball details, but they say something. Mattingly was not simply a bat stationed at first base, he was a craftsman. By the end of 1985, the outline of a Hall of Fame career was easy to imagine. Batting champion one year, MVP the next, Gold Glove defense, New York stage, a swing made for highlights and baseball cards, a nickname that sounded like it had always existed, Donnie Baseball. And still, the part that makes this story linger is that 1985 was not even the clear top of the mountain, because the next season, he may have been better. In 1986, Don Mattingly hit .352. He led the American League with 238 hits and 53 doubles. Both were Yankees franchise records, breaking marks set by Earl Combs and Lou Gehrig from the legendary 1927 team. That is not background decoration. That is Yankee mythology. To pass names from 1927 is to step into a room where very few modern players ever get invited.
Mattingly also led the league in slugging percentage at 5.73 and total bases with 388. His 53 doubles and 388 total bases were the highest totals by any major league player in the 1980s. He had the league's longest hitting streak of the season, 24 games. He hit 31 home runs. He drove in 113. And he did all of this while striking out very little by modern standards. Between 1985 and 1987, Mattingly hit 96 home runs and struck out only 114 times. That combination feels almost from another sport now. Power without swing and miss, average without being a singles hitter, doubles everywhere, balls driven into gaps, long at-bats that still ended with contact. That was the hitter he was at his best. Yet he did not win the MVP in 1986. Roger Clemens did. Clemens was brilliant that year, and he also won the Cy Young Award. Mattingly finished second. There is no need to turn that into an injustice, but for the shape of Mattingly's legacy, it matters. Because 1986 was one of those seasons that, with an MVP attached to it, might have been remembered differently by later generations. Awards are not everything, but they become signposts. They tell people where to look. Mattingly's 1986 season was historically great, but without the MVP label, it often gets folded into the broader story, when it may have been the purest expression of his prime. A .352 average, 238 hits, 53 doubles, 388 total bases, a Yankee breaking Gehrig-era records. That is not just a hot season, that is a player at the centre of his powers. And for anyone watching in real time, it was fair to ask what the next 10 years might look like. If this was Don Mattingly at 25, what would he be at 28, at 30, with better Yankee teams around him, with October baseball finally returning to the Bronx? That is where the story starts to tighten, because when a player reaches that kind of height, the audience naturally assumes the rest of the career will be a long continuation. But baseball rarely offers a straight line. In 1987, Mattingly was still producing at a level most players never touch. He hit .327 with 30 home runs and 115 RBI. It was his 4th straight year with at least 110 RBI. He remained a star, still a central figure in the American League, still the man opposing pitchers had to work around. And for a few weeks that summer, he did something almost unreal. From July 8th through July 18, with the All-Star break in the middle, Mattingly hit home runs in 8 consecutive games, tying the Major League record held by Dale Long. Ken Griffey Jr. would later tie it too in 1993. Mattingly did not just tie the record quietly. During that streak, he hit 10 home runs. Long and Griffey each had 8 during their streaks. Mattingly also set a record by recording an extra base hit in 10 consecutive games. On July 16th, against the Texas Rangers, he hit 2 home runs, including a grand slam, and drove in a career-high 7 runs. That season, he hit 6 grand slams, setting a major league record that Travis Hafner later matched in 2006. And here is the strange part. Those 6 grand slams in 1987 were the only grand slams of Mattingly's entire career. Baseball is full of numbers that make sense only because they happened. This is one of them. A player known for steady excellence, for repeatable skill, for the dependable shape of his game, produces one of the oddest power records in Major League history, all inside one season. If the story ended there, 1987 would simply be another chapter in a superstar's rise. But it does not end there. The source notes that in June 1987, Mattingly reportedly injured his back during clubhouse horseplay with pitcher Bob Shirley, though both denied it. The source also makes clear that congenital back problems later forced him to miss part of the 1990 season and contributed to the decline in his power hitting. It is important not to overstate what can be proven from that one 1987 report. The responsible way to tell it is this. By the late 1980s and into 1990, Mattingly's back would become the central physical issue of his career. And once that happened, the hitter who had looked so automatic would begin to change. That is the quiet dread in watching his 1987 season from a distance. The numbers are still brilliant. The records are still there. The aura is still intact. But somewhere beyond the box scores, the thing that would alter the rest of his career was waiting. At 26, Don Mattingly already had a batting title, an MVP, a runner-up MVP finish, multiple gold gloves, franchise records, and a place among the most respected players in the sport. The line from there to Cooperstown looked visible, maybe even likely. But careers are not built only out of talent. They are built out of timing, health, team context, and the body's willingness to keep allowing the swing that made everything possible. For Don Mattingly, the swing was still there. The question was how long his back would let him keep it. The answer did not arrive all at once. That is one of the reasons Don Mattingly's decline can be misunderstood. It was not a sudden disappearance. It was not one day great, the next day gone. For a while, he was still very good, still respected, still dangerous enough to matter. In 1988, he hit .311. He had 18 home runs and 88 RBI. Those numbers would be a strong season for almost anyone. But compared to what Mattingly had just been, they felt different. That is the burden of a peak like his. Once a player spends 3 years looking like one of the best hitters alive, even excellence can start to look like slippage. In 1989, he drove in 113 runs. His average dipped to .303, but he was still producing, still in the middle of the Yankee order, still a player opponents had to respect. But the force of the swing was changing. Then came 1990. Mattingly's back problems flared badly enough that he went on the disabled list in July. He returned late in the season, but the numbers were unlike anything people had come to expect from him. A .256 batting average, 5 home runs, 42 RBI. Almost 400 at-bats, and the old impact was not there. For a player whose identity had been built on reliability, that line was startling. Not because a ball player had a bad year. Every player has one. It was startling because it suggested something more permanent might be happening. The source describes congenital back problems, and those problems did not merely cost him time. They changed the shape of his offense.
After extensive therapy in the off-season, Mattingly came back and continued to play, but the hitter was no longer quite the same. Over his final 5 seasons, he averaged .290. That is still real hitting. That is still a professional at work.
But he hit only 53 home runs in those 5 years. The player who once drove balls into gaps and over walls with such authority became more of a slap hitter. That phrase can sound dismissive if it is not handled carefully. It should not be. What it really means is that Mattingly adjusted to what his body would allow. He remained useful. He remained smart. He remained respected. He continued to hit enough to help a major league team. But the version of Don Mattingly that had threatened the record books was gone. His defense remained strong, but even there, the back mattered. From 1989 to 1992, he was sometimes used as a designated hitter, not because anyone doubted what he could do with a glove, because playing first base every day asks things of the body that a bad back may not always give. There is a particular kind of sadness in watching a great player adapt downward. It is not failure, it is negotiation. The player still knows the strike zone, still knows pitches, still knows the rhythm of the game. But the body has taken away the extra gear. The ball that used to split the gap now gets caught. The pitch that used to be driven into the seats becomes a line drive single. The mind remembers the old swing. The back does not always cooperate. And yet, Mattingly did not become a symbol of giving in. In 1991, he was named captain of the New York Yankees. That mattered. The Yankees do not hand that title out casually, and Mattingly received it during a period when the franchise was still trying to find its footing. He was not captaining a dynasty. He was captaining a team that had lost its old certainty. In 1992, he led the Yankees in RBI, hits, doubles, runs scored, and batting average. He was not the 1985 MVP anymore, but he was still the standard inside that clubhouse. Then in 1993, there was a brief return of power. Mattingly hit 17 home runs and drove in 86 runs in 134 games. The Yankees finished second in the division, behind the Toronto Blue Jays. On July 22, he hit his 200th career home run, a 3-run shot against the California Angels. For a moment, it was possible to wonder if there was one more run coming. Not the old run, maybe, but something close enough to dream on. And then the 1994 season made the whole story even more complicated. By 1994, the Yankees were no longer wandering. They were good. Really good. They had the best record in the American League when the players' strike ended the season. The postseason was cancelled. No division series, no championship series, no World Series. Mattingly hit .304 that year, his first season over 300 since 1989. He passed 1,000 RBI. He recorded his 2,000th career hit. And still, October vanished. For a player who had spent his entire career waiting for the Yankees to return to the postseason, 1994 is one of the great quiet what-ifs. No one can say what would have happened. Baseball does not give championships for projections. But it is fair to say that Mattingly had finally reached a season where the Yankees looked ready. Then, the season ended in a labor stoppage. That is the strange weight of his career. The injuries are the obvious turning point, but the timing may have been just as cruel. Mattingly made his major league debut in 1982, the year after the Yankees had lost the World Series. For his first 13 seasons, the Yankees did not reach the postseason. During the 1980s, they had the best overall record of any major league team, according to the source, but never broke through into October with him. Then, when they finally had the American League's best record in 1994, the playoffs were cancelled. Then, the year after his final game, they won the World Series. That is not a neat tragedy. It is something more baseball-specific than that. A career can be filled with success and still be haunted by calendar luck.
and Mattingly's calendar was brutal. The Yankees of the early 1990s were becoming something. Younger players were arriving. The organization was shifting. The foundation of the late 1990s dynasty was beginning to take shape. Mattingly's veteran leadership and influence on younger players has been credited with helping propel the club to 4 World Series titles in the next 5 years. But he would not be on the field for them. His place in Yankee history would be different. Not the champion at the center of the celebration. The bridge. The captain before the rings. The man who kept the uniform serious while the franchise found its way back. That is why 1995 felt so large.
The Yankees clinched the American League wildcard on the final day of the season with a 6-1 road win over Toronto. Mattingly hit his final regular season home run that day in the 5th inning. There is something almost too clean about that detail. After everything, after all the years of waiting, his last regular season homer helped send him to the only postseason series of his career. The opponent was Seattle, a team with its own urgency, its own rising stars, its own October electricity. The Yankees won Game 1. In Game 2 at Yankee Stadium, Mattingly delivered the swing so many fans had waited for. A go-ahead home run, his first postseason home run, his final game in Yankee Stadium. The stadium shook because the moment was bigger than the score. Fans were not just cheering a home run, they were cheering 13 years of patience. They were cheering the player who had stayed through the drought. They were cheering the idea that maybe, just maybe, baseball was going to let this end properly. Mattingly kept hitting. He batted .417 in the series. He had 4 doubles. He drove in 6 runs. The source notes that he drove in go-ahead runs in 3 games. In Game 5, with the series on the line, he came through again with a 2-run double that broke a tie. That could have been the frame. That could have been the image that carried into the next round. Don Mattingly, after all those years, pulling one more big hit from a body that had already given so much. But Seattle came back. The Mariners won in the 11th inning. The Yankees were eliminated, and Mattingly's postseason career was 5 games long. 5 games, and he was excellent in them. That is another part of the ache. He did not finally get to October and disappear. He did not look overwhelmed. He did not damage the romantic memory by failing under pressure. He showed up. Then it ended anyway. After the season, the Yankees acquired Tino Martinez to succeed him at first base. Mattingly was unsigned for 1996. He sat out the season. The Baltimore Orioles made an inquiry about signing him at mid-season, but he declined. In January 1997, he officially retired. By then, the Yankees had already won the 1996 World Series. That single fact does a lot of damage to the heart of the story. The Yankees played in the World Series in 1981, the year before Mattingly's debut. They won it in 1996, the year after his last season. His entire playing career fit inside the franchise's longest World Series drought since the start of the Babe Ruth era. 14 seasons in pinstripes, no World Series appearance. That is almost impossible for a player that good, on that franchise, in that uniform. And because baseball memory is so tied to October, it changed how later generations encountered him. If you watched Don Mattingly in real time, you did not need a postseason montage to understand what he was. You saw the batting title. You saw the 145 RBI. You saw the doubles. You saw the glove. You saw the calm. You saw the way Yankee fans treated him. But if you came along later, you saw the gaps first. No World Series ring. No Hall of Fame plaque. A peak that ended early. A career that looked, in the blunt language of historical comparison, a little short. That is how a player can be deeply remembered and still misunderstood.
The Yankees understood what he meant. On August 31, 1997, they retired his number 23 and dedicated his plaque in Monument Park. The words on that plaque call him a humble man of grace and dignity, a captain who led by example, and a Yankee forever. That is not a small honor in the Bronx. It also makes him unusual. According to the source, Mattingly became the only Yankee to have his number retired without having won a World Series with the team. That fact says two things at once. It says what he missed, and it says how much he still mattered. He finished his career with 2,153 hits, 222 home runs, 1,007 runs scored, 1,099 RBI, 3 Silver Sluggers, 6 All-Star selections, 9 Gold Gloves, 1 batting title, and 1 MVP. His career batting average was .307. At the time, that placed him behind only a small group of modern hitters with at least 5,000 at-bats since expansion began in 1961. Tony Gwynn, Wade Boggs, Ward Carew, Kirby Puckett, and Roberto Clemente. That is serious company. But Hall of Fame debates are rarely built on feeling alone. Mattingly became eligible for Cooperstown in 2001. He received 28.2% of the vote in his first year. Election requires 75%. The next year, he dropped to 20%.
For much of the next decade, he generally stayed between 10 and 14%. In 2015, his final year on the writers' ballot, he received 9%. He has remained eligible through era committee consideration. He appeared on contemporary baseball era ballots, including for 2018, 2020, 2023, and 2026 classes, according to the source, but was not elected. His closest approach came with 50% of the vote in 2023. That is the official record. The argument underneath it has never really gone away. One reason is Kirby Puckett. Puckett was elected to the Hall of Fame in 2001, the same year Mattingly first appeared on the ballot. Their career totals have often been compared because they are close in shape. Puckett played 1,783 games. Mattingly played 1,785. Puckett had 2,304 hits, a .318 average, 207 home runs, and 1,085 RBI. Mattingly had 2,153 hits, a .307 average, 222 home runs, and 1,099 RBI. Puckett had more hits, a higher average, more All-Star selections, and 2 World Series championships with the Minnesota Twins. Mattingly had more home runs, more RBI, more Gold Gloves, and one of the great first-base defensive reputations of his time. The source notes that Puckett's election has generally been attributed to the belief that his production was more consistent, and to sympathy over his career ending abruptly because of an eye injury. Mattingly's case is different. His career did not end in one clean break. His prime faded while he kept playing. That may have made the greatness harder to preserve in public memory. People saw the decline years. They saw him still competing, still respected, but no longer the force he had been. A sudden ending can freeze a player in the imagination. A gradual decline asks people to remember the peak on purpose. The source also compares Mattingly to Hall of Famers Bill Terry and George Kell. Terry had a high batting average in a much different offensive era. Kell had a similar average and elite defensive reputation at third base. The comparisons do not settle the argument, but they show why the conversation persists. Baseball reference metrics from the source put Mattingly at 42.4 career WAR, with a 35.7 7-year peak WAR and 39.0 JAWS.
The listed average for Hall of Fame first baseman is higher, 65.0 career WAR, 42.1 peak WAR, and 53.5 JAWS. So if you want the coldest version of the case against him, it is right there. The career value is short of the average Hall of Fame first baseman. But if you want the case for why people still argue, that is there too. For 3 years, from 1984 through 1986, Mattingly was as good as almost anyone in baseball. From 1985 through 1987, He hit 96 home runs and struck out 114 times. He won an MVP. He finished second for another. He won 9 Gold Gloves. He hit .307 lifetime. He carried a famous uniform through a difficult era. That is the tension. The Hall of Fame is supposed to honor greatness, but how much greatness is enough when the body takes the rest? That question does not have to be answered here. Maybe it cannot be answered cleanly. But it is the reason Don Mattingly remains more than a nostalgic name. He sits right on the fault line between peak and longevity, between memory and measurement, between what voters count and what fans swear they saw. And when his playing days ended, he did not leave baseball behind. After retiring, Mattingly spent 7 seasons as a special instructor during Yankee spring training in Tampa from 1997 through 2003. Then, after the 2003 season, the Yankees named him hitting coach. In 2004, under Mattingly as hitting coach, the Yankees set a franchise record with 242 home runs. After the 2006 season, he became the Yankees bench coach. When Joe Torre declined a 1-year contract extension after 2007, Mattingly was a finalist for the Yankees manager job, along with Joe Girardi and Tony Pena. The Yankees chose Girardi. That could have been another strange ending. Mattingly, once again, close to the center of Yankee history, but not quite inside the next room. Instead, he followed Torre to Los Angeles. He joined the Dodgers as hitting coach in 2008, later serving as Major League Special Assignment coach, before becoming hitting coach again that July. The Dodgers reached the National League Championship Series in both 2008 and 2009, losing both times to the Philadelphia Phillies. When Torre retired after the 2010 season, Mattingly succeeded him as Dodgers manager.
His managerial debut came on March 31, 2011, with a 2-1 win over the San Francisco Giants at Dodger Stadium. He managed the Dodgers through 2015. In 2013, after a rough start marked by injuries and speculation about his job security, the Dodgers recovered, won the National League West, and beat the Atlanta Braves in the Division Series before losing to the St. Louis Cardinals in the NLCS. Mattingly finished second in NL Manager of the Year voting. The Dodgers won 3 straight division titles under him. His regular season record with Los Angeles was 446-363, a .551 winning percentage. According to the source, that was second best in Los Angeles Dodgers history at the time. He was also the first manager in franchise history to guide the team to 3 straight postseason appearances. But October remained complicated. His postseason record with the Dodgers was 8-11. The team lost in the NLDS in both 2014 and 2015. After the 2015 season, Mattingly and the Dodgers mutually agreed to part ways. Then came Miami. In the fall of 2015, he signed a 4-year contract to manage the Marlins. In his first season, he led them to 79 wins, the club's most since 2010, and finished 5th in NL Manager of the Year voting. In 2020, he guided the Marlins to the postseason for the first time since 2003. He was named National League Manager of the Year. That award placed him in rare company. He joined Frank Robinson and Joe Torre as the 3rd person to win an MVP award, a Gold Glove, and Manager of the Year. That is a remarkable baseball life. Not a clean one, not one with every traditional ending, but remarkable. He later served as bench coach for the Toronto Blue Jays from 2023 to 2025, according to the source, and was on the staff when Toronto reached the 2025 World Series. The Blue Jays lost in 7 games to the Dodgers, managed by Dave Roberts, the man Los Angeles hired after parting ways with Mattingly in 2015. The source also states that Mattingly joined the Philadelphia Phillies as bench coach in 2026 and became interim manager after Rob Thompson was dismissed in April of that year. Even without leaning too heavily on the later coaching chapters, the pattern is clear. Baseball kept finding uses for Don Mattingly: hitter, instructor, coach, manager, bench coach. He remained close to the game because the game still valued what he knew: But most people do not first think of Don Mattingly as a manager. They think of the stance, the mustache, the number 23, the left-handed swing, the glove at first, the name on baseball cards, the feeling that for a few years the Yankees had a player who made the difficult years feel steadier. That is the real center of his story. Don Mattingly spent his entire playing career with one team from 1982 through 1995. In the modern game, that alone makes him feel like he belongs to another time. He was not traded away. He did not chase the ring somewhere else. He did not become a late career rental in another uniform. He stayed a Yankee. And because he stayed, he absorbed the shape of that era. The Yankees of his prime were not the Ruth Yankees, the DiMaggio Yankees, the Mantle Yankees, or the Jeter Yankees. They were something more restless, famous, wealthy, watched, and often disappointing. A team with history pressing down on it, and no October release. Mattingly became the face of that pressure. He was good enough that fans could believe, but the team was never quite good enough, at least not until his body had already taken too much from him. That is why his career still stirs something in people who saw it. It is not just the statistics, though the statistics are strong. It is the sense of interrupted possibility. A player can get hurt early and become a myth. A player can age normally and become a complete career. Mattingly landed somewhere harder to explain. His greatness was not theoretical. It happened. It won awards. It broke records. It filled Yankee Stadium with expectation. But it did not last long enough to remove all doubt. That is the line his career lives on. He was not a failed Hall of Famer. He was not merely a very good player with a famous uniform. He was a great player for a short, brilliant window, and then a proud, diminished, still valuable player after the window closed. That distinction matters, because baseball history often wants clean categories: Hall of Famer or not, champion or not, legend or not. But careers are lived in messier territory.
They are shaped by backs and knees, by strikes and bullpens, by front offices and aging curves, by whether the right teammates arrive 2 years early or 1 year late. Mattingly's career asks the viewer to sit with that messiness. What if his back holds up? What if the Yankees reach October in 1985 or 1986? What if the 1994 season is finished? What if the 1996 championship core arrives while he still has enough left? None of those questions changes the record. They do not give him a ring. They do not put him in Cooperstown. But they explain why his name refuses to settle into a simple answer. Don Mattingly deserves to be remembered because he was the best Yankee of a difficult Yankee era. Because he hit like a batting champion, defended like a specialist, led like a captain, and carried himself with enough dignity that the franchise retired his number even without a World Series attached to it. He deserves to be remembered because his career is a reminder that baseball greatness is not always confirmed by the perfect ending. Sometimes it arrives early, burns bright, gets interrupted, and leaves behind a question that never fully goes away. For those who watched him, Don Mattingly was not a what-if because people imagined he was great. He was a what-if because they knew he was.